Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing some hardware modifications to my TRS-80 MC-10 micro color computer. Now you may have seen in a previous video that I'm actually working on a game for this computer, and I think at least one of these modifications, and possibly both, should make it a bit easier for me to work on that game. So the two modifications that I'm planning, one of them is a composite video modification, which is probably a very common upgrade for this computer. That is using a circuit board from the Zipster Zone, and I'll put the links to these mods down below. And so let's go ahead and take a look at that one first. Where did I put the envelope? Okay, here. So here is the envelope that I ordered from the Zipster Zone, and it should contain a PC board, which will allow this computer to have composite video output. And it should be a very simple, theoretically, installation. And it simply replaces the RF video output can that's inside the computer right now. So that should be a very simple installation, and I'm hoping that it'll improve the video quality on my monitor when I'm actually programming my game. So that should make it a bit more enjoyable to look at while I'm doing my programming. And the other modification, called the PiKey mod, and here is the card that came with it. MCX-32 SD, PiKey.tech is the website. And this modification is from Brendan Donaghy, and I'm really thankful that he was able to send me one. And this is an exciting modification because, well, let me read on the back. It explains exactly what this modification does to improve the MC-10. And it says, add wired USB keyboard and 9-pin Atari joystick or Sega gamepad, button B only, controller ports to your MC-10, 2 built-in keyboard maps, modern touch type and MC-10, user reconfigurable joystick to keyboard mapping, and optional on-screen configuration feedback. So what I'm most excited about this, although it does add the capability of using Atari-style joysticks with the MC-10, as you may or may not have seen in a previous video of mine, I showed how to build, well, not really how to build it, but I built a joystick interface that connects to the serial port on this computer. It only allows the joystick to work with 2 directions plus the fire button, but that's okay since my game only uses 2 directions and the fire button. But what I'm more excited about with this PiKey modification is being able to connect a standard USB keyboard to the computer. So I could use that instead of using the built-in keyboard on the computer itself. So I think that might be a little easier for programming rather than using the built-in keyboard. Although, to be honest, I didn't find it that difficult really using the built-in keyboard. It has hard chiclet keys that are quite responsive and they work really well. I find it quite easy to get used to using the keys on the MC-10, but I'm going to try out this modification to see how it is compared to using a USB keyboard with this computer. So before we go ahead and start the modifications, let me just show you the parts that I'll be using for the PiKey mod, or the PiKey-10 mod. And I have a couple packages here that came in the box. I'll open this little one first and show you what's inside. I haven't even opened these myself yet. And inside here we have these rectangular, or triangular I should say, plastic stands, and these are to allow you to actually stand up the MC-10 computer. After the modification has been installed, you can use these stands to stand the computer vertically if you want. And the reason I have 2 of them is because I ordered 2 separate modification kits for this computer. And I'll show you why I did that in a moment. Well, I'll show you why right now. So let's go ahead and open the other package here. And this one should have more goodies inside. So first of all, I'll take out the parts packages. There's some wires and components. And this looks like some screws and more wiring. And here is a circuit board. as well as this is a frame. And finally, I have one more frame. So I have two frames that obviously go with the two mounts. So I have a black frame and a mount, and a blue frame and a blue mount. And the reason I have two of them is because if we look at these closely, and you'll get a better idea exactly what these are used for when we do the actual assembly. But what you need to do in installing this modification is you obviously take the computer apart, you separate the top and the bottom halves of the computer, and then this frame piece sandwiches in between the top and bottom halves. So that gives the inside of the computer enough room to house the circuit board and the other parts that are needed. And let's take a look at these frames and see why I have two of them. If I can get them the right way around here. So here on what would be, I think this would be the front of the computer, you can see there are two rectangular notches here. And this is where the joystick connectors will be positioned. And you can see that with the blue one as well. It has these two cutouts for the joysticks. And if I put them on top of each other, you can see that the blue one actually has two extra holes. And the reason for that is the blue frame is a bit different in design. It's actually built to allow the installation of another video modification, which is called Coco VGA. And that gives the MC-10 computer VGA video capabilities. So just in case I plan to install that at some future date, then I have this frame available in case I want to do that. I could either swap it out, or maybe I could have a different MC-10 computer that is equipped with VGA, and this one can be equipped with the composite video output. But that's why I have two. So here you can see this one allows for a power switch, as well as a reset switch, as well as over here on the side, this is where the Coco VGA would actually install in this bracket. Otherwise, these two brackets are the same on the back side and on the other side as well. Oh, they even stack together. That's cool. So that's what I'm planning to do, is install these two modifications. And I think first what I'll do is install the composite video modification, because that should theoretically be the easier one to install. And then I'll go ahead and test it out, and we'll see if we can capture some video through the composite video and see how the composite video actually compares to the regular RF video that is normally inside the MC-10, normally produced by the MC-10. And then I'll go ahead and install the PiKey modification and use it to test out a USB keyboard, because that's why I'm installing it in the first place. And that should be really exciting as well. So again, I'll put the links to both of these modifications down below in case you want to order them for yourself. So if you're interested in the MC-10 and seeing some hardware modifications to improve its capabilities, then stick around, because we're going to get started right now. So the first thing we want to do is obviously open up our TRS-80 MC-10 color computer, and I'm going to try and resist the temptation to make the usual jokes about voiding our warranty. However, I will be peeling back this sticker to see if I can do this without actually damaging the sticker. So that will be my first step, just to open up the computer. There are two keyboard cables attached here and here. So you can see there are two connectors that we actually have to unclip in order to get these keyboard cables out. So I'll go ahead and do that now. So I just lifted them up with the end of my Phillips screwdriver. They're pretty easy to lift up, and now they're free, and I should be able to remove these keyboard cables now. So I'll see if they'll just easily pop out. There we go. So I did have to apply a bit of pressure to get them out, but now the top is removed. All right, so the next step is to go ahead and remove the PC board from the enclosure. But before I do that, I'm just going to remove this fuzzy tabletop cover to avoid any static damage to the PCB, and then we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so here we have 3 screws, 1, 2, and 3. So we'll go ahead and remove those. All right, now our circuit board should be free of the case, which it is. Okay, so now what I want to do is remove this shielding on the back. And it is held in by some little clips that we need to remove. And we do that from the top side. And there you can see a close-up of the tab that's holding in the shield. So apparently I can't remove them all just yet because I have a lot of these tabs are hidden underneath this top plate. However, this top shield is actually soldered in at several locations. So to remove the top shield, we're going to have to actually desolder it. However, in order to do just the composite video mod, I only need access to the underside of this RF can. So if I take a look at the back side here, there are a few clips that it looks like I should be able to remove for the RF shielding on the bottom, which may allow me to just access this can without having to desolder this top shield. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those clips and see if that gives me enough access. And that's what they look like close up. So now I have these 3 pins removed that are holding on this bottom shield, and it looks like I can actually do one more here, so I'll go ahead and remove that one. Okay, so I have these 4 clips removed now, and I think if I just simply peel this shielding back, yep, now I have access to the entire bottom side of this can. Now I will want to remove probably both of these shields in order to do all of the modifications that I'll be doing today. But for now, maybe I can just deal with this one shield at the back just by moving it back. And I'm going to see if I can actually just cut this off for now. So first let's go ahead and take a look at which connections I actually need to desolder. And it looks like these connections here, these 3 here, and then these big lugs holding it into the PC board. Now unfortunately I don't own a solder sucker, but I do own a decent quality soldering iron with a fairly large tip on it. So I'm hoping that combined with my solder sucker tool should do the job. Okay, there we go. So now you can see that these tabs are free and these pins are now free. So if you just push against the pin and if you see it move within the hole and you're satisfied that it's free, then you should be able to go ahead and try to remove the part, which we're going to do right now. So you can see the can is now free under that tab, and if I try to pull it, these pins are now all loose. So I should be able to go ahead and remove this can now. And there we go. So now all we need to do is solder the new composite video board in place where this RF can came out, and it just goes in with these 3 pins and then these 7 pins here, and then 1 tab at the front as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the board. Right here you can see that on the back side it has these 3 pins here, and then those 7 pins, and then 1 tab at the front. So we'll go ahead and solder this in now. All right, so if we take a look at this way, you can see we just need to solder in these 7 pins here, these 3 pins here, and then finally this one tab over here at the front. And now you can see we have a connector on the back which will output our composite video signal. But for this signal, we're no longer using the regular RF connector, of course. So this is going to require a special cable, which I should have in my inventory, hopefully. So let me go ahead and see if I have one of those. All right, so I found this cable with 3 connections, and then the other end has RCA jacks. Now I probably could use RCA plugs on this end to plug it directly into my video capture card, but I'm just going to use this with some cables plugged in there, and I'll go ahead and hook it up to my capture card and we'll see what happens. All right, so there we go. We have composite video from the new composite video out board. It doesn't look fantastic, well, although I'm not really expecting composite video to look fantastic, but at least it gives me a way to capture the video from this computer now. So I would say it looks pretty much about the same as an RF video signal. All right, so we've now got the composite video mod installed in our MC-10 computer, and it's now time to go ahead and install the PiKey mod to see if we can connect a USB keyboard to the MC-10 computer. So stick around, we're going to do that right now. All right, so here we are on the PiKey.tech website, where it shows how to install the PiKey 10 modification on the MC-10 computer. And there are several pages, several pictures, lots of instructions, and it's a step-by-step instruction on how to go ahead and do this installation. So I'm going to go ahead and follow these instructions, and we'll switch the camera over and we'll go ahead and get started doing this modification. Okay, so here we are. You can see I've gone ahead and removed the shield from the top side of the board as well as from the bottom side of the board. And just take note, if you're planning to do this modification yourself at home, that if you want to reinstall either of those shields, particularly the bottom one, then obviously you don't want to cut it in half the way that I did when I was doing my composite video mod. So it's up to you if you want to save the shields and reinstall them. I don't know if they're particularly necessary or not, but I'm choosing to not reinstall them on my particular machine. But it's up to you if you want to save them and reinstall them. You obviously don't want to damage them if you do plan to reinstall them. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and begin the PiKey mod installation, and that is going to allow me to use a regular USB keyboard with this MC-10 computer, as well as it also adds capabilities for using a joystick if I want, although I don't think I really plan to use that particular capability. But at least I want to see if I can get this to work with a USB keyboard. So let's go ahead and get started. So first let's take a look at all the different components that come in this kit to allow us to do this modification. And they come in a few different bags here. So let's take a look at this one first. And if we open it up here, it contains a smaller bag and some parts. So here you can see we have 4 long screws that are going to allow us to screw the case back together once it has the spacers installed, which is going to give the case some extra height. Here we have a power cable connector. Here we have some female sockets, which are used for mounting the PC board onto the PC board of the MC-10 computer. And here we have several spacers that were included. I'm not sure exactly what those are for yet. I presume they go perhaps on these screws to arrange the height at the proper level for reassembly, but I'll find that out a bit later. And here we have a USB cable dongle thing, which is going to allow us to connect the USB keyboard to the front of our MC-10 computer. And that will plug into a connector on the circuit board that comes with this modification package. All right, let's take a look at another package here. So here we have another baggie of parts, and inside here we can see we have switches mainly and some wiring. So here we have a momentary switch, which would be the reset switch, which I won't be installing today. Here we have what looks like a push on, push off switch. All right, there we go. Oh, and it even has a power symbol on it. So this should be a push on, push off switch. If you can see that. Clicks in and out. So this is the power switch, which I also won't be installing today because, again, I'm not using the spacer that has the cutout for these switches. And then here we have some wiring harnesses. This one looks like it would be for this power switch. So I won't be using these power switches or wiring harnesses today in my modification installation. So finally, let's take a look at the circuit board that comes with this modification kit. Right here. And there you can see it says the PiKey, and obviously it's called that because right here you can see this board has a Raspberry Pi Pico installed on it. And here are the joystick connectors, the DB9 connectors that we would use obviously to connect joysticks to the front of the computer. And then there are some other places for headers and some pins on the side here. And so this is what we're going to be installing onto the circuit board inside the MC-10 computer. Alright, so the first step is to go ahead and desolder these two keyboard connectors from the PC board of the MC-10, and we're going to be replacing them with these female headers here so that we can install the circuit board that comes with this modification kit. But we will be saving these original connectors to reuse them to attach the original MC-10 keyboard back onto this modification. So the way I'm going to do this modification, there's actually two different ways you can choose whether or not you want the original keyboard to remain functional or whether you just want to strictly replace it with a USB keyboard. In my case, I want to retain the functionality of the original keyboard that comes with the MC-10 computer. So I will be reusing these original keyboard connectors and mounting them on top of the modification PCB, which we'll see in a moment. So first let's go ahead and desolder these two connectors. Okay, so I've got these holes all cleared out now, and I can go ahead and solder in these headers. Okay, so the headers are in now. There they are. And now the next step is to solder these keyboard headers onto the circuit board that comes with the PiKey mod. So we'll go ahead and do that now. So that step is done. We have those two keyboard headers on now. So now when I do the reassembly, I'll be plugging the original MC-10 keyboard cables into these connectors instead of where they used to be on the original PC board inside the MC-10. The next step is to install this power wire pigtail to leads on this voltage regulator right here. One of the wires goes to the pin that's labeled out, so the red wire will connect to this pin labeled out, and the black wire will connect to this center pin which is labeled ground. So it makes me kind of nervous soldering, well, not really nervous, but I don't really like the idea of soldering directly to component leads like this. It would be nice if we could have taken these power lines from points on the actual circuit board, but I'm okay with soldering it to this voltage regulator in this case, so that's what I'm going to do. That's what the instructions say to do, so I'll follow the instructions. So we'll go ahead and do that now. So the next step of the procedure is to reinstall the shield on the bottom side of the board. But as you saw in the first part of my video, I actually destroyed the shield while I was doing this modification. So I won't be able to reinstall my shield, but this is the point where you would reinstall it if you were doing this on your own. So I'm just going to go on to the next step, which is putting this PC board back into the base of the enclosure. So I've got my channel selector switch handle reinstalled back onto the switch, and now I should be able to reinstall this PC board back into the base. Okay, now the circuit board is back in the case bottom, and let's see what we need to do next. So the next step is to install this spacer onto the bottom half of the enclosure, but I also need to install some spacers for the screws that are going to be going through these two rear mounting points here, and I'm going to be using these longer screws that were supplied in the kit. And so I'm going to put the screws in first, and that will allow me to keep the spacers in place. So here's a longer screw, and I'll just put it through the back mounting hole here, and then another one on the other corner, just like that. So now I've got my two screws in place, and I'm going to take two of these large spacers that come in the kit and put those over the screws. That will fill in the gap between the MC-10 circuit board and the bottom of these screw mounts in the spacer here. So now I should be able to go ahead and slide this onto the screws like that. Okay, so our spacer is now in place on the case. And next what I need to do is go ahead and remove these mounting lugs that are on either end of these joystick ports, because I'll need to reinstall them later when I put this circuit board into my MC-10. So it looks like these front shrouds also come off when I take those mounting lugs off. So I'll need to obviously reinstall those. And now I need to go ahead and install this circuit board into my unit here. And I'm just going to drop these header pins here into these female headers that I installed earlier. So now what I need to do is connect the wire for the power to this circuit board. And here is the connector here. So this connector is labeled plus 5 volts here on this outer pin, and then this inner pin is labeled ground. So here on my power wire, the red wire goes to the plus 5 and the black wire goes to the ground. Just like that. And again, we want to make sure that these power wires inside here are not shorting together, because that would be a bad thing to have the power wires shorting to each other, but it looks like mine are okay. Alright, so now what I need to do is go ahead and get the top of my enclosure and reconnect the keyboard cables to these connectors here, and then we can go ahead and reassemble the unit. So here's the top of the enclosure. There are the keyboard cables that I need to reconnect. And there's two. Alright, so now we can go ahead and reassemble our case. Okay, so we've got this case reassembled now, and it looks pretty good. You can see there is a black spacer now in between the two halves of the enclosure. All four sides look nicely assembled. And then all the original connectors just feed through the back of the case and the riser. So this is what it looks like. So that looks pretty good. All right, so now that we have our PiKey modification installed in our MC-10 computer, let's go ahead and test it out, and we'll see how the USB keyboard works. And I think all I need to do in order to test it is to plug in our USB dongle here into the front, right here, just like that, I suppose. So then I think now it should be good to go. All right, so let's go ahead and plug this back in and power it up and test it out. All right, so I've got my MC-10 connected to a Composite to HDMI converter box because I now have my Composite video mod installed. So let's go ahead and power it up, and first of all just test it with the regular keyboard and see if the original keyboard still works. So let's go ahead and test the original MC-10 keyboard now to see if it is still working. And so far it's looking pretty good. Yep, it's looking like it is working. Yep, good. So the original keyboard still works. Now let me grab a USB keyboard and see if that works. Okay, I'll be back in 1 second. Alright, so I'm now going to try the MC-10 computer with this cheap USB keyboard that I've been using for my other computers, my other retro computers, and we'll see if it's going to work with this new PiKey mod and the MC-10. So now I have my USB keyboard connected, and although the instructions said that this modification doesn't work with all USB keyboards, I'm hoping, obviously, that it works with mine. So let's go ahead and test it out. 1, 2, 3. Yep, it looks like it is working. And indeed, let's see how responsive it is. Well, it's very responsive. There's no lag whatsoever. Let's see if I can enter a simple program here. And it is using the keys on my keyboard now in the standard locations rather than the locations where you would find the characters on the regular MC-10 keyboard layout, which is really cool. So I don't have to hunt around to find things like the quotation mark and different things like that, different symbols that are on the keyboard. So that's really cool. This should make programming a lot easier. 20, go to 10. Run. There we go. So that's pretty cool. Now I'm just going to check the website for this modification to see what other instructions there are for using it. So here, if we take a look at the website, it says using the PiKey 10 with a wired USB keyboard connect the keyboard, etc., etc. And it says by default, it will use the standard modern computer keyboard map, where what you type is what you get. So that's pretty cool. No more hunting around for characters in weird locations on the keyboard. This is referred to touch type by PiKey 10 when in verbose mode. You can toggle between the standard modern keyboard map and an alternate keyboard map, which is a better physical layout matched to the MC-10 keyboard for users whose muscle memory automatically switch upon viewing the MC-10's green display and text. It says press GUI-K. Note that the MC-10 style keyboard map has the following exceptions to what a user might be used on a typical modern PC keyboard. So I guess you can go through this chart and see where the differences are between the MC-10 keyboard and a regular USB keyboard. So here you can see how to use the PiKey 10 modification with a 9-pin Atari joystick or Sega joypad. So here it says to connect the joystick or joypad to the desired front panel joystick port labeled 1 or 0, power up the MC-10, and then by default it will map to these keys. So up, right, down, left will map to W, S, Z, and A, and then the joystick 1 button for a single Atari joystick button model would map to space, and then joystick, so that's for joystick 1. For joystick 0, up, right, down, and left would map to I, K, M, and J, and then the joystick 0 fire button would map to enter. Okay, and then you can remap them as well, and it says to press GUI J to remap the joystick, GUI V to disable verbose mode. So the GUI key would be, I guess, the Windows key on my USB keyboard. Oh, and it gives you keyboard mapping for some different types of games: Pac-Man, Asteroids, Breakout, Pong, etc. Okay, that's pretty cool. Okay, so let me go back to the other screen, and I'm going to try these keyboard controls, GUI-V, and what was the other one? GUI/-J. So that will, GUI-J will configure the keyboard, or sorry, the joystick, and GUI-V will switch it into verbose mode. So how do you switch between the regular built-in MC-10 keyboard and the USB keyboard layouts? Oh, GUI-K for keyboard. Okay, so that makes sense. GUI-K is for the keyboard, GUI-J is for the joystick, and GUI-V is for verbose. Let's go back and try those out. Okay, here we are back in the MC-10 environment with our PiKey mod installed. So let me try those GUI shortcuts. So the GUI key on my USB keyboard is the little Windows key. So I'm going to first of all try Windows key plus V, which should toggle the verbose mode. And there we go. So now it says verbose mode enabled. And I guess that just explains things in more detail on the screen. I obviously haven't played around with this much yet, but it says verbose mode enabled. Keyboard mode is touch type, and joystick map mode is inactive. Okay, so now I'm going to try the Windows key plus K, which should change the keyboard mode. Keyboard mode MC-10. Okay, so now when I type on the keyboard, I should get the symbols that are on the regular MC-10 keyboard. So for example, on the 2 key, I get a 2, Control 2 gives me continue, Shift 2 gives me the apostrophe. And now I no longer get the apostrophe. Oh, I do. I still get the apostrophe and quote in the normal location on my USB keyboard as well. Okay, so I'm going to just switch back to, although I'm sure there are some differences. If you would go back and take a look at that chart that we just looked at, that should explain that to us. But I'm going to change the keyboard mode back to touch type mode, which is USB keyboard mode. So now let's see what happens if I press Windows and J for configuring the joystick. Alright, so it says press key to map to joystick function. Include any required control or shift then operate joystick's matching function. Okay, so I don't have a joystick connected, although I could connect one, so why don't I go ahead and do that? I'll connect up a joystick here. Just give me a moment. Alright, so I now have a joystick connected to the joystick 0 port. So press key to map joystick function. So let's say I want to map the O key to left. I'll press O, mapping O2, and now I'm going to press left on the joystick. And it says joystick left. Oh, cool. It says joystick 1 left, although I've got my joystick plugged into port 0. So let me move my joystick over to port 1 and see if that makes a difference. Okay, so I've got my joystick plugged into port 1 now on the PiKey mod, and I'm going to try mapping, let's say, the P key, mapping P key, and now I'm going to press my joystick to the right, and it says joystick 0 right. So I'm just going to double check the labels on my spacer that comes with this PiKey mod, and it looks like something is reversed. I'm not actually sure which joystick should be 0 or 1, but on the spacer, joystick 1 is on the left, joystick 0 is on the right, but you can see on the mapping that I just did in the menu here that they're actually reversed. When I plug it into the joystick 0, it seems to map to joystick 1 and vice versa. Okay, so I'm going to probably send a note to Brendan to see if I'm doing something wrong, or if maybe there's something mislabeled in here or something I'm not understanding. But that's pretty cool. You can map a joystick direction to a key on the keyboard. So now that I've got the P key mapped to right, what happens if I press right on my joystick? Joystick 0 right, joystick 0 right. Okay, so now I'm just going to, what am I going to do? I'll press Windows J again. Joystick map mode inactive. Okay, so now I've exited the joystick map mode. Now what if I press right on the joystick? Now it gives me a P. Cool. So now you can map your joystick directions to whatever keys you need on your keyboard to play your games. So this is really awesome. Alright, so now I've got my MC-10 working with my USB keyboard as well as my Atari style joystick, which is really cool. You can map the directions and the fire button on the joystick to whatever keys you want on the keyboard, and you can go ahead and use it for playing your games. That is awesome. This is a really incredible modification that we've got here, and it seemed to go together pretty well. Everything worked the first time. So now what I want to do is go ahead and try this computer with this device, which you may recognize as the MCX-32 SD, which is an SD card solution for the MC-10 computer, and it also gives it more memory and enhanced version of BASIC. It's an awesome device which I'm actually using to develop a game for this little computer, and so I want to just make sure that this device works with the MC-10 that has been modified using both the Composite video output as well as this PiKey modification. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this in, make sure my computer is turned off, and I'll plug this in. And this computer looks pretty cool now with this extended riser in it. You can see it looks really neat, and you can get this riser in all different colors as well. You can go ahead and contact Brendan if you're interested in this modification, which you probably should be if you're handy with electronics and you own an MC-10. I am happy with mine so far. It looks pretty incredible. But you can see these spacers come in different colors, which is really cool. So now I'm just going to power on this unit and make sure it still works with my, what is this thing called? With my MCX-32 SD, and I may even give you a quick preview of a game I'm working on. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so let's go ahead and power on the MC-10 computer with the MCX-32 SD installed. And there it is. It started up, and we have our MCX Basic version 3.0 right there. And so that means we have the MCX-32 SD module working with our PiKey mod installed as well. So now let me try using my USB keyboard. I'm going to type dir to get a directory listing of what is on the SD card. And I have lots of files saved here. And so let's try out one of them, which is a new game I'm working on called T.H.E.M. And I'll just load it up. Run them2.bas. And there we go. There's the intro screen for my game. I'll press the space bar. There's the startup menu for my game. And let's just go and head right into the game and we'll do a quick preview of it. Okay, so we have a bit of a follow-up here. I actually just received an email from Brendan Donaghy, and he has updated the firmware for the PiKey mod in response to me reporting to him about the issue or the question I was having regarding the numbering for the joysticks and how that relates to the numbering in the key mapping for the joystick directions. And he said he's gone ahead and updated the firmware for the PiKey mod, and he's provided me with directions for how to update the firmware in my unit. So we're going to have a little bonus section here in my video, and we're going to go through and learn how to update the firmware in our PiKey 10 modification. So we're going to go ahead and give that a try right now, and this should be fun. So let's give it a try. Alright, so here we go. Now I'm ready to try upgrading the firmware in my PiKey mod, which is installed in my MC-10 computer. And I'm following the directions that were sent to me by Brendan Donaghy. And step 1, or actually step 0, is to disconnect all your cables from the MC-10, which I have done. There is nothing connected to it. And the next step is to open your MC-10. It says you may not have to open it all the way, just enough to get to the little white button marked boot cell near the flashing green light. So I don't expect I'm going to see any flashing green lights in my MC-10 since there's no power connected to it. But let's go ahead and open it up and see if we can find a little white button marked boot cell. Okay, let's do that now. So here we go. I do indeed see a little white button marked boot cell right there. Alright, so the next step says to get a USB-A to USB micro cable, connect the USB-A side to a PC. And I happen to have a cable right here. Here I have USB-A and a USB micro on this side. And I'm going to connect the USB-A side to my PC. Alright, so that's done, and it says, while holding down the boot cell button on the PiKey, plug in the micro USB side of the cable into the keyboard port. So I'm going to go ahead and press down this button. Alright, so the button is pressed down, and I'll plug in this cable just to see if it does anything. And it is doing something which you can't see on your screen. But on my Windows computer, it says there's a new device has been set up. Okay, I'm switching to this screen now because when the PiKey board was connected to my PC using the USB cable, it opened up, well, it installed this device, it activated it, and it opened up this folder here. And I've also downloaded a file that Brendan sent me as an attachment, which contains the new version of the firmware. And the next step in the process here, it says when the PC mounts the Raspberry Pi drive, drag and drop the attached file to that drive. So I'm going to grab that file that was sent to me, and I'll just drag it over here and copy it into this Raspberry Pi folder, I guess it is. So there's a flashing green light on this PiKey board on the Raspberry Pi Pico board that's inside the MC-10 computer now. And let me just check my next instructions here. It says wait until the green light starts to flash and unplug the USB cable. Okay, so the green light is flashing right there, and I'll go ahead and unplug this USB cable. All right. And it says plug everything back in and use the MC-10 normally. Okay, so we should be all done now with our firmware upgrade for our PiKey mod. So I'll go ahead and close up this unit, put everything back together, and we'll try out that keyboard mapping function for the joystick again, and we'll see if it now matches the labels that are on the joystick ports on the front of this unit. First thing I need to do is realign this spacer here with the screw hole because it's shifted a little bit. So before I reassemble my computer, I need to get that thing lined up. Just like that. And I'll check the one on the other side as well. All right, both of the back screws are in now, lined up with the spacers. I'll go ahead and reassemble this unit. Okay, so we've got our MC-10 computer back together now, and let's go ahead and hook it back up to power, and we'll try out that joystick configuration utility one more time. Okay, so our MC-10 is back together now, and I've got it connected to power, and I'm going to be plugging in a joystick to one of these two front ports, which you can see are labeled joystick 0 and joystick 1 right here. So I'm going to run the joystick configuration utility, and we'll see if the utility numbers match the numbers that are printed on the front of this spacer for the PiKey 10 mod. All right, so let's go ahead and do that now. Joystick ready to go, and I'm going to plug it first into joystick port 0, which is the one on the right here. So I'll go ahead and plug that in. There we go. Now we're ready to go. Okay, the USB keyboard is still working. So Windows V. All right, so now we're in verbose mode, and joystick map mode is active. Okay, so let me press Windows J again. Joystick mode inactive, Windows J. All right, joystick mode is now active. So now let me try mapping a key to a joystick direction again and see if it matches up. So as we just saw, my joystick is plugged into port 0 as it's labeled on the front of my MC-10, and I'll go ahead and try mapping key X, mapping X to, and then I'll press up. Joystick 0 up. Okay, so it looks like it's mapping correctly now. I'll just try another one. I'll map key E, mapping E key to, and I'll press left. Joystick 0 left. Okay, so it looks like the joystick identifier is correct now. And also, if you noticed before when I was doing the mapping, it would come up with multiple reports saying joystick 0 whatever. So it would come up actually with 3 messages here, but now it just comes up with 1 message. So Brendan mentioned that he did fix that bouncing issue as well. So I guess that is an issue with my particular joystick being particularly bouncy. So he's added some sort of debounce code into his firmware. So now I'm going to move my joystick over to port 1, and we'll go ahead and test it again and make sure that the joystick identifier number changes when I map to joystick number 1 now. Okay, so let me try mapping, let's say key L. Mapping L2, and I'll press up on my joystick. Joystick 1 up. Okay, so now the identifiers in the key mapping utility match the identifiers that are printed on the actual frame that you get with the PiKey modification kit. Okay, cool. So it's working good now. I'm glad we got that sorted out. Thanks very much, Brendan. So now we have 2 fantastic hardware mods we can use to breathe new life into our cool MC-10 microcolor computer. If you're interested in checking out either of these 2 mods, I'll put links to both of them in the description down below, as well as if you're interested in checking out the new game I'm working on, I'll put a link to that as well, and it should be appearing soon on my itch.io site. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.